you know, I had nothing bad to say about the fans. The fans are amazing. You know, I love I love Ansar as a club. But I think when it came down to it, uh, there was things in my contract that were breached, frankly. And I mean, small things that could have been easily resolved, and then you go to big things that maybe needed a little bit of work. But small things, for example, in my contract, I had when I travel from the States, they were to pay for my bag. And I arrived in July, submitted the receipt. This is before the economic situation, and to this day, still nothing. You know,
Yeah.
didn't receive a penny for it. I had gotten sick in January, and I went to the hospital twice. Fever, vomiting, stomach ache, everything, you name it. I was sick as a dog. Um, I had to pay for my own medical expenses and did not receive anything from the club after giving them my receipts. And then my apartment as well. Uh, in my contract, like I said, it says specifically in words Hamra. And I think in January, before we went to Asia Cup, my apartment contacted me saying Ansar said they're going to stop paying for your apartment. Uh, Ansar didn't tell me, hey, like there's another place in Hamra we could take you to. They said there's a place in Nami, the same place that you lived in last year. And that place, I mean, nothing against Nami, but bro, I had to deal with cockroaches and mosquitoes and no AC and paint smells, and it wasn't ideal. I can't perform at my best if I'm not comfortable at home. They, I mean, they didn't even offer a solution apart from that, and they made me pay for my rent for February, and then the situation of the reduced salary. I'm not sure if you've heard, but in October, the president had a meeting with all of us saying that we're going to accept or we're going to start to pay you 66%. Now, I learned after the meeting what was said because I didn't understand 100% of what he was saying. And the players had all agreed to it. They agreed to it saying, oh, we all agree. And I personally didn't agree to it. And learning what was said afterwards, when they paid us our rent, and the rent, they said we're going to pay you rent October, November, December at 66%. They made us sign a paper when we were receiving the salary, and on the paper I specifically wrote I'm still owed the rest of my salary, um, just to cover myself legally.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that on there. They just said okay, yeah. And I mean, keep in mind also for October, I think we received the salary November 20 something. For November and December, we received the salary end of December. And January comes along, and I learned that the foreign players were receiving more of a percentage. And I was like, wait a second, why? Are they're not better than any of the domestic? How can the domestic players accept this? And they were like, oh, they live outside of the country, so they need more. And I said, well, I live outside of Lebanon too. No one's contacted me about this. No one, it's unfair. Even if you live inside or outside, to
Yeah.
pay players more is not right. Um, I was just, I mean, my head had kind of gone at that point. We had signed a new coach, signed a new player as well, and I'm thinking, okay, they're cutting down on on budgets and they're signing new players.
Yeah.
How? Uh, and then I was speaking to my agent too at this time, informing him, hey, like this is what's going on. What do I do? Do I accept it? And I think January comes, we're getting ready to go to our first game in the AFC Cup. And my head had gone because I'd learned news that I was paying for my own apartment out of pocket. So I think my agent messaged the club, said on February 15th after the game, he said, this he sent them an official document saying there's these things, four things in the contract to resolve. or to work to. It was like a 15-day notice. Please resolve them before. And I think he got a voice note back, nothing official, a voice note saying there's a crisis in Lebanon and there's force majeure. And I was like, wait, do we need to talk to lawyers about force majeure? And he was like, look, force majeure doesn't apply if A, the club is still operative, B, they're still paying their players, and C, if they're still signing new players. I mean, if you're training and players are receiving salary, unless there's a natural disaster, unless there's ISIS in the streets, force majeure doesn't apply. I think on March 1st, after the 15-day notice, after no response from the club, I hired a lawyer and I went to a notary and served the club. I terminated my contract. And I was, because I had it at that point. I was playing out of position as well. I mean, salaries were late. I was still paying out of pocket for my rent. The situation in Lebanon wasn't good at all. And so I served them on March 2nd. And a week later, I get an official document from Ansar saying we're terminating your contract because your performance has dropped, because you didn't show up to training for the last week. And I sent that to my lawyer and he started laughing. He's like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. It's almost like you break up with your girlfriend and then 7 days later she sends you a text saying it's over.
Yeah.
It's almost what they did. I mean, I had nothing personal against them. I mean, when you have a contract, you have to follow the contract. End of story. And if you can't follow the contract, at least have dialogue to come to certain terms, to agree on something. There was no agreement. They were just saying, this is it. This is what you're doing. And I think that's a little bit of the problem of what Lebanon kind of goes through. You know, when it comes to outside of Lebanon, for example, if you have a contract and you break one thing in that contract, I mean, you can legally terminate the contract and receive everything.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just follow through 90% of the contract or 80%. You have to follow it. And I think maybe that they believe that they have people on the inside of the federation or people in the court or a judge that would rule in their favor. But I mean, I think in the coming months, I'll have a formal sit down with my lawyer and plan to proceed accordingly. But I have nothing personal against Ansar. I wanted them to follow the contract. They had breached it on 4 different occasions. And I guess this Ansan in Korea, which sounds like Ansar, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And they're green too. Who would have thought? And it's the city that I played in with the national team. It was kind of like a gift. It kind of fell into our laps with the window here closing. I was able to put pen to paper and then get in to Korea before they closed the airport. So they were closing the airport on Wednesday. Wednesday, and I had received my visa to come to Korea, my work visa, on like Monday night. And then so we had booked the flight right away, and boom, just like that. I left to Korea, I arrived, the airport in Lebanon was closed. Excuse me. Crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a pretty common story in Lebanon of players having these kind of situations. Did you talk to any other player that was going through the same thing?
Yeah, Nader Matar,
Yeah.
good friend of mine. He had the same situation with Nijme. Nijme was a little bit smarter about how they proceeded. You know, they responded officially with before the 15-day notice that Nader had served them. Ansar didn't respond until after I had terminated my contract legally. I think Nijme also, I just read it in the paper, there's a Brazilian player that
Yeah.
they owed money to, and FIFA ruled in favor of the player. I think there's going to be a couple more cases coming with this whole, protest going on in Lebanon, with a lot of players not receiving what they were owed. Um, so, I mean, I hope that the players get what they're owed. It's better for football this way. It's not good to see players getting the short end of the stick. And I think hopefully maybe this is a turning point to make clubs and even the federation run more professionally when it comes to contracts and providing necessary, I guess, amenities or necessary things for the players.